This episode is brought to you by The Manor, a premier addiction treatment facility in the hills of Wisconsin's Kettle Moraine Forest. Their program offers a tailored approach to those struggling with addiction in a secluded setting with no more than 11 men and women. With highly personalized treatment focused on trauma, Dr. Chantal Thomas and her expert team offer an authentic experience, creating the kind of deep emotional change that's crucial for long-term recovery. If you or someone you love are struggling with addiction, call The Manor at 414-930-1930. You can learn more about The Manor by clicking the link in the show notes or by visiting discoverthemanor.com. Thank you for listening to The Path to Authenticity. My name's Tom Gentry. I think of this show as the opposite of small talk. You'll hear real conversations with real people who know who they are. We talk about what makes them who they are, how they became who they are, and how we might become truer expressions of who we are.
I'm Ezra Bates, and this is The Path to Authenticity.
Your first time here, thanks for checking it out. If not, thanks for coming back. I'm Tom Gentry, and this is The Path to Authenticity, episode 157 for January 4th, 2022. Features a conversation with my friend, the recovery coach Ezra Bates, which we recorded on Clubhouse on New Year's Eve. We cover a lot of stuff. We talk about manhood, we talk about recovery, and we talk about the intersection between the two. As well as both of our individual philosophies on recovery and treating addiction and how they sort of overlap. Very congruent. But before we get into that, I want to talk about this January journaling challenge thing. We're a few days into it now, and it's really taken off. I'm excited about it. So what I'm doing is I'm sending out an email to all the participants. Then I'm posting it on a private Facebook page where some of them are sharing what they've journaled in response to that day's prompt. So I'm going to read to you the prompt for today, the 3rd. It's entitled Coming Out of Hiding. And it starts with a quote from Jordan Peterson. You are not everything you could be, and you know it. And then the prompts that I gave them for today. In what way or ways are you afraid to be seen? What are you hiding? What are you hiding from? What are you hiding behind? If you show the world the parts of yourself you're concealing, what's the worst that could happen? And what's the best that could happen? So, that's today's prompt, and I want to read to you one of the responses. This one hits deep. There's so much of me that is open and unapologetic, and then there is a shadow that only very few know. The first thing that comes to mind is that I'm afraid to be seen for my insecurity. And this mostly comes in the form of imposter syndrome in my career at this point in my life. But it has shown up as insecurity in my appearance, my intelligence, my finances, my mental health, my social skills, etc., at various points in my life. It cycles, but it all comes from the same self-doubting place. I'm hiding a rather intense anxiety, which is partly my personality and partly the remnants of old mental health struggles that no longer rule my life, but often show themselves temporarily, mostly in times of change. I'm hiding from myself, or those parts of me that have always felt, quote unquote, not good enough or flawed. These are core beliefs I've been battling since childhood. I'm hiding behind an outward calmness, easygoing approach, smile, and peacefulness. It's not always a facade. These parts of me are also very real, but when I need them to serve as a mask, they are perfect because they are a complete 180 from what's often under the surface. I have shown these parts of me, but the idea of showing the world, everyone, makes me cringe. These parts feel like some kind of combination of sacred, private, in need of protection, and shameful. The worst that could happen, though, is having to face these feelings more head on. The best that could happen, if I was totally transparent all the time, is that I'd likely connect with more people. There are people I'm open with about all of it, but being vulnerable gets tough for me depending on the context. This forum, where I'm not sharing it face to face, and where writing on my own feels intimate and safe, feels good. But to be honest, there's a part of me that will be anxious to post this. However, at this point in my life, in appropriate contexts, the part of me that is unapologetic usually wins. I'm pretty open with my close friends and family, and often my clients when it's in their best interest. That always feels good, and maybe this is the right mix for me. Private with most and open with some. That feels like genuinely me. Maybe because I'm a true introvert, or maybe because that's just what feels best. I'm not sure it really matters. So yeah, that's the depth of that is just really satisfying to me. When I started this thing, I wasn't sure how people would respond. I wasn't sure how much they would be willing to share. But this private Facebook group seems to be a good way to engage. So if you haven't already signed up, do it. I'm going to leave a link in the show notes. I've always kind of intended to do this annually. You know, once I got the idea, I thought this would be a cool thing to do every year. But now, after getting a few days into it, I'm definitely going to do that. It's been great. So, I hope you appreciate me sharing that. I appreciate all the engagement. And I love this stuff. So, anyway, hope you guys enjoy this episode with Ezra. I think you will. Here we go. Ezra Bates. Ezra. Where to begin with you? You know, I guess, first of all, I'll acknowledge that we're recording this on what our people call amateur night, New Year's Eve. So there's that. But you and I cross paths in rooms on Clubhouse, and I just felt immediately like we were kindred spirits. And it's been really great getting to know you. I think about this conversation we had a few weeks ago, where I just kind of went through my entire religious history with you, which
that's right.
is pretty heavy. And I felt heard and validated and that doesn't always happen. There aren't a lot of people who really know how to do that, who know how to listen and affirm and validate. So, I value you as a sounding board, as someone to talk to. And I also, I think you see something I see as a man in long-term recovery. One of the things I've always felt really strongly about is that I'm a human being first.
Yeah.
And my alcoholism doesn't define me.
Right.
It's just something I went through. And I feel like you believe that too, and you live that out.
Absolutely.
And I also think that you lead with love, which is something I try to do. That's how I try to live my life.
It's a practice.
It is a practice, but those are two pretty good reasons to be friends, right?
They absolutely are, man.
Yeah. So, where are you from, Ezra, originally?
So I was born in Jackson, Mississippi. Yeah, that's where I was born. I moved when I was in the 7th grade, I believe it was. So I don't know how old I was, but to Huntsville, Alabama for about 6 months to a year, I believe, with my dad, and then moved to Atlanta, where I spent most of my adolescent through teenage years up until it was time to go to college, was in Atlanta. So when people ask me where I'm from now, I literally just claim Atlanta, because that's kind of where I grew up. But I moved to Huntsville again when I was a senior in high school. Did my last several months of being a senior in Huntsville. Went to college there, got married, and stayed there until 2012. So I got to Huntsville in '88. So I moved around quite a bit. So I spent the better part of my life in Huntsville, but I claim Atlanta as my home.
And now you live in Knoxville, right?
Now I live in Chattanooga.
Oh, that's
Tennessee
right. I'm sorry. I get them confused.
I'm about 2 hours from Knoxville.
Okay.
So,
So you've kind of done the tour across the deep South, man. You've lived in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee.
Yeah, that's right. And Texas.
Texas too?
Texas as well, yeah.
Well, you go to Florida, North and South Carolina, and you have just about all the Confederacy that you've lived in at one point or another. Missouri, I guess.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because when I think about the Confederacy and the part of it that the bulk of my history stems from, Lindsaya, who's here in the listening audience, I think she is anyway. Oh yeah, there she is. And I've been talking about having some conversations around the topic of racism. So it's interesting you brought up Confederacy, and because for me, when you say Confederacy, it may spark a little bit different of a trigger than it would for most. So,
yeah. Well, when I say that, I think about we're sort of emotionally detached as a society from the fact that this country was almost two countries and killed hundreds of thousands of each other.
Yeah.
Over the right to possess a human being.
Yeah, that's right, man.
I mean, that's crazy.
That's wild when you think about it, right?
And it wasn't all that long ago. Not really. When you look at the history of countries, like China's been around for thousands of years. I mean, we've been around for a couple of hundred, going on 300. And it's just I think a lot of us want to just act like it was so long ago, but in the grand scheme of things, it really wasn't.
No. Yeah, it's true.
So why don't you tell the listener what you do?
So what I do, how I make my money is, I have a business here in Chattanooga. It's called INV Handyman Services. And so I literally service people who have all kinds of projects and things like that, construction wise, from small to medium size, nothing really major, kind of projects. And I've been doing that now since 2019. My former training is as an electrician. So I'm a certified electrician, but I hadn't done it in so long that I decided when I opened up this business in 2019 to kind of broaden my reach a little bit and do a handyman service, since I have other things that I know how to do. Also, what I'm doing currently is I'm building another business as we speak, a coaching business to service people in recovery, kind of post people who are in recovery who found a place of stability where they're not acting out. They don't have the craziness in life anymore. They've had some real substantial sobriety, but don't know what to do now.
Mm.
And so, my business that I'm building around that now is blooming. So I'm looking forward to stepping into that real soon.
Well, another thing that you and I have in common, other than I've had a handyman service myself, not
Yes,
as elaborate as you, and was a carpenter where you were an electrician, but we've both also been substance abuse counselors.
Right.
And most of how that plays out now for me is coaching people and families. And most of the individual work that I do is with men, almost invariably.
Right.
And my little niche that has seemed to have emerged over the last few years, and it's no coincidence, is guys who, most of them have been sober quite a while, but they're struggling in their romantic relationships and essentially mired in codependency.
Yeah.
And their relationships with themselves are fractured,
Yeah.
So
that makes so much sense. That's a powerful piece of work there.
Yeah. And it's not anything I intended to do, but I think a big part of it is having been married and divorced in recovery and then doing the work that follows that,
Man, you said it wasn't something you intended to do. And when I think about my life, the only thing that I ever intended to do was to try to fix my life. Otherwise, the way the things that we find ourselves stepped into, or the things that are called to us, always come from a place of a deep experience that we've had that we didn't intend to have. And so, we find ourselves doing careers and having relationships and being called into all kinds of things, not intending to. If I had done what I had intended to do, I'd be an engineer, and I'd probably be super miserable and very unhappy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the way I like to think of it is, and this isn't my idea, I think a lot of people have expressed it this way. It's that's when our wounds become sacred.
Yeah.
Because they enable us. We become in touch with our own wounds and we tend our own wounds. And then that enables us to better understand and support people as they tend their wounds.
I love the idea of a sacred wound, Tom. That really resonated with me right now, because it gives purpose to all of the shit that I experienced. And when I think about it like that, those things that were the toughest pieces of my life to navigate are the areas in which I am able to pay forward in such a stronger way, because of that. So, of that sacred wound. And so I really resonate with that terminology you just used, man.
Well, and I think it's listening to you, I'm thinking about it's almost as though the more painful the experience, the more sacred the wound. When I think about there are a few times in my life when I've seen a really dramatic example of this. And one of them was a young guy who was 22 or 23 years old, getting sober and extremely depressed, and described to me his childhood and his family relationships. And I heard him talking about my emotional abuse, in which my brother was the perpetrator. He had a brother who treated him the same way. And so, there aren't a whole lot of people who could say to him, well, you love him, but you hate him, right? You want to be like him, but you also want to bash his head in with a baseball bat at the same time. And that's confusing, man. That's confusing stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, just the other day I was having a conversation with a client who, is kind of white knuckling the sobriety thing and feels comfortable in that. Like, I got this, that whole thing that, we see all the time when we start thinking we got this.
Oh man, that's a bad place to be.
It is. Because, for me, it's like, God's got this. I don't have anything,
Well,
but
honestly, I think it depends on the intention of it when you say it,
yeah.
If you're saying I got this from a place of surrender, right? Like I can do this, like I'm capable, and you're affirming yourself, that's one thing. But if you're saying I got this as in, like step off,
I don't need to do the work.
Yeah. I don't need to do the work. Like I'm good. That's the trouble space. It really is. That's a real slippery slope.
Well, and what I was talking to him about is how when we don't build on our spiritual condition, what eventually happens if we suffer from an addiction is that, it's not that we think about it and then decide we're going to drink.
Right.
It's that one day we just do it without even thinking about it. We just do it.
Right.
And that's a scary scenario.
Yeah.
Because it really is powerlessness.
Yeah, it really is powerless. And that is why the path to recovery is a very tricky one, because, and essentially we have to learn how to walk differently. We have to learn how to speak to ourselves and to others differently. It's a whole entire reprogramming when we decide to step away from that, that piece. That's why it's such an important part of, of understanding that recovery may not always be easy, but it's going to be worth it. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I also think it's that journey from the head to the heart.
Man.
When we really internalize it, because we can't think our way into it.
Well, our best thinking.
Right.
Our best thinking.
It got us here.
Got us where we were, man. Yeah. It was only in surrendering my thinking and being willing to trust the thinking of others that I was able to actually see some success. Yeah. Until I was able to fix my thinking.
So talk about what made you decide to start coaching people with second stage recovery concerns.
Man, it was like you said, Tom, it wasn't something that I intended to do. So just a little bit about kind of how I got to even becoming involved in addiction so heavily, or addiction recovery, and actually in a career, is when I went to treatment myself. I spent 30 days in treatment. And while I was there, something spoke to me that I wanted to give this back in a major way. And so that's where it kind of started for me. It started from my recovery experience, my treatment experience. And so I didn't know how that was going to manifest at all. I was a full-time electrician. I actually had my own business at the time as an electrician in Huntsville, Alabama. And I got back to my regular life, and off I go, back into it. And I never took the time again to really look into what it would take to step into a career. But of course, I had my own sobriety and recovery to kind of manage before I could do any major things. And it just kind of, how life does it. You have this great idea or this inspiration, and if you don't seize it in the moment, it goes away. And so it did. It went away for the next, I don't know, let's see, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 3 or 4 years. And so I decided to continue just doing what I was doing. And then my kids, 2 of my children, I have 4 children, by the way, from the ages of 28 to 19.
And if I'm not mistaken, you're also a grandfather, right?
You're not mistaken, Tom. I am. I'm a grandfather of 3.
Wow.
And the oldest being, I think she told me today, he's 11.
Wow.
I don't keep up with their ages because they don't keep up with mine. So I think it's just a matter of respect at this point to not know how old they are.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a granddad. Yeah.
So, but
yeah.
you were saying something and I interrupted you.
So I think I was just saying that, my 2 youngest, my middle 2, decided to go off to a boarding school. At this point, their mother and I were separated. I had been living alone on my own anyway for a couple of years at that point. And I was in Huntsville, and I just kind of felt stuck at my church. I wanted to just escape the whole city. And so I took the opportunity to move when they moved. So that's how I actually got into this area. The school they went to was close to this area that I'm in now, and so I moved out here for them and for me. And so when I got here, I needed a job, and I had a friend who back home in Huntsville who I had talked to. I saw this posting for a job as a substance abuse counselor, or no, it was actually doing crisis counseling. So I hit her up. I was like, hey, there's a spot here with the same company you work for. Can you talk to the person in charge for me and give me an interview? So she did. And I went in for the interview and got the job. And the rest, man, just kind of built from there. I would do like intake when people would come in for treatment. And then I would also do like emergency calls out, like to hospitals, to other treatment facilities, to try to motivate, certain patients who met requirements to go to treatment. I would do an assessment on spot and say, hey, yeah, really what we'd like to see you do is go to treatment and to go today.
Right.
And not wait a week, but, you're currently in the hospital with this emergency because of your drug and alcohol abuse. You've been doing this now for 3 years. It's time to get help, and we want you to come today. So that was kind of the role I played in the very beginning, which, man, was gritty and dirty. They kind of threw me right into I didn't realize, but I was stepping right into the pit of, when people are at, hitting rock bottom. Yeah. And so I did that for like 9 months. And then the superintendent at that job, she was the main facilitator in that place. She got another job with another company, and she asked me to come with her. And so because she had seen the work I was doing and how naturally I was called to do the work, and she asked me to come with her. So I did. And I started working for a methadone treatment facility. And I did that for the next 6 years.
Wow.
Yeah. I opened up a clinic in San Antonio, Texas. I got promoted to open up a clinic in San Antonio, and I went out and opened the space up. Started with one client, and before I left, it was over 300 in the space of a year. And so, that came about from just kind of me going out to other facilities and really sharing my heart and my vision for people with addiction. And so there were facilities who were supposed to be competitors of ours who would send patients to us because of my connection to them. And, and so that was beautiful. Like, that whole experience was beautiful. I came back to Atlanta. I got another promotion, came back to Atlanta, and then it all went to shit. And a week later, I was looking for another job. So I got another job with another facility just like that, and did that for another 2 years, and realized that, man, this isn't where I'm called to be. I had a dream, Tom, that I resigned from that job. It was a Sunday night. I had a dream that I had resigned. And when I woke up, I felt this immense peace in my spirit. And so I quit. I quit and started the business that I'm in now. But that passion to pay forward all of the things that I had experienced, and my passion for helping people who are in addiction. And so all of this stuff none of it was really intended necessarily. The only thing that was intentional about any of it was the fact that I wanted to be better. And as I grew, these opportunities, they just kind of presented themselves. And so this coaching now with, clients who are at a place of a plateau, who want to find purpose, who want to, expand and shift their lives, came from my own need of it. And so, being as a matter of fact, by the way, tomorrow is my anniversary. And so I'll be 11 years from one behavior and 16 from another. So, I just, I'm super grateful for that. But it came from a place of, being clean for a long time, being sober, and still not feeling like I'm living my purpose. And so that dream that I had is what catapulted me into that, and ever since then, I get downloads from universe about what it looks like and how it's supposed to, who I'm supposed to serve and all of that. Like, none of that came from me. It wasn't my idea necessarily. It was just me trying to be connected spiritually and listen for direction, And so that's where I've been led to, man.
So going back to these jobs that you had at these agencies. So I've worked in the substance abuse treatment industry for a long time and have had the luxury of working mostly for high-end nonprofits that really aren't nonprofits.
Right.
I mean, they are, but they're not poor.
But they're not, right. They're not poor at all.
Most of the time you have to have means to go.
Right.
So that means that as a staff, we have adequate resources. There's, it's a nice atmosphere to work in and can focus on like abstinence and helping people change.
Yeah.
Now, I can imagine what it must be like to work in a methadone clinic.
Right.
But we're talking about apples and oranges, right?
We are.
And I had a guest a year or so ago who started a methadone, a medication assisted treatment intensive outpatient program in Denver.
Okay.
And he had a passion for that because that was part of his experience. Before he got clean and sober, he ended up on methadone, which is not great, not a great place to be, you know?
No, it's not a great place to be. In my mind, when I think about the way that I always wanted to guide my patients was for them to use it as a bridge and not as a place to go and come and stay forever, which is what we see. You know, we see people come in, they don't ever get proper counseling and guidance, and they stay, you know, which is never what that place was meant for.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and just kind of the state of addiction treatment is such that insurance providers are more likely to pay for medication assisted treatment than they are to pay for, you know, abstinence based treatment.
Well, yeah, because nobody's making money off of you just being abstinent. Like, there's lots of money to be made from, you know, the sale of this medication. Tons of money.
And whereas the treatment industry hasn't done a very good job of documenting outcomes at all, the pharmaceutical industry has.
Yeah,
so,
that's right.
You know,
and the pharmaceutical industry knows that people are not really staying sober all the time unless they're really connecting and building community, which, Tom, the last time I saw the statistics, they were very, very sad of people who go to treatment or who start treatment or who start recovery and who actually are successful. It's very, very, very low.
Yeah.
And so what does happen though, what is effective, especially in this culture, in this country, is the quick fix.
Right.
And no shame to anybody who's on medicated assisted treatment. Like, I've seen some I still have patients today from 5 and 6 years ago who write me and email me and send me Facebook messages about how, you know, beautifully their recovery's gone once they stop using methadone the way that I guided them through it.
Right.
And not to big up me or anything, but to say that when you do it right. And when you have the right guide, it's a beautiful, beautiful process.
Right.
But what you see is, you know,
here's your dose.
Here's
Hit
your dose.
The road. Yeah.
Right. And people, and then, you know, that's the medical side of it. But then the actual responsible person, the responsibility of the person in treatment is to remember that the goal is to be abstinent from every drug, period. But they never get that piece because all they want to do is stop the craziness.
Right.
These people are spending $500 a day or more on drugs, right? And they're having to do it in the most sketchy places. They're risking their lives and their freedom to do it. And all of a sudden somebody says, hey, you can get free tomorrow, right? And they come in and they get that low dose of methadone, and for about 3 hours, they feel like, oh my God, I'm in heaven. I don't have to go chase drugs today. And so for that, it's a beautiful thing because it gives people hope that, you know what, maybe I can do this.
Right.
You know, maybe I can put my life back together. Maybe I can, you know, get my kids back from the court system. Maybe I can restore my relationship with my wife. Maybe I can restore my relationship with my family. Maybe they'll, you know, start to support me again because I burned every fucking bridge. And so methadone has a place as it relates to that. But I think the best use of methadone, if you're going to use it, is have a 3 to 6 month to 9 month, a year tops plan on what you're going to do to build community around yourself, on how you're going to set your life up to be successful with the right guidance and community in place. And that is what doesn't happen because nobody makes money off of that.
Right. Yeah. And in my little world, my little corner of the industry, there's always been a significant stigma against medication assisted treatment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just because, that's what you're describing. Most people don't go through that process where they, at most they stay on it for a year and they're supported with adequate care all the way through. What usually happens is they just end up staying on it, and it becomes an even more difficult habit to break.
Yes, it is, because methadone is no joke.
Right.
Yeah.
But, there's a woman in Chicago who started a nonprofit a number of years ago after her brother died of a heroin overdose. And it advocates for medication assisted treatment because he wanted that.
Yeah.
And his family was advised not to do that. And they sent him to myriad treatment facilities. But maybe a harm reduction approach would have helped this guy.
Yes.
And instead he's dead.
Instead he's dead.
So,
yeah.
Which to me reminds me of, who am I to say?
Yeah.
I mean, I know what worked for me. And I just, when I think about this stuff, I just thank God that I never had to contend with it, because I've seen how people suffer with it,
Yeah. And what I think has happened too, Tom, is that the sober community, and it's starting to change. Places like Clubhouse has really been helpful for that, because there's been a mix of different modalities in one room, right? So you may have somebody who's in a sober room who is there, somebody may be sober from, or trying to get sober curious from alcohol and drugs. The next person is trying to, control their food addiction. And the next person, all in the same room, all these different modalities. And so I think that that's helped a lot. But I think the sober community at large, especially the old school, which is kind of, I feel like in a way, I kind of came up in some of the old school ways. It's just stop, go to meetings, do what you're told, period.
Mm-hmm.
But in today's society, Tom, as you can see, there's so much more to contend with. So my thing, my sex addiction piece is compulsive sexual behavior. When I first started getting involved in it when I was a child, it was only one way to even access it. You had to go to some grimy gas station or store on some street. All of them didn't even have them, and go to some section in the back of the store to even glance at them. And then if you had the courage to pick it up and take it to the counter, you were a badass. Right. But now you don't have to leave your house. You don't have to get out of bed.
Yeah. You could do it at work. Yeah.
Any of it. You can watch porn at work. You can get high at work. You can take your little sip at work. You can overeat at work. You can do it all, or stay home, and all of it's the same. You don't have to move.
Right.
And so, I think that there's so much more to contend with. That piece of that modality of recovery has a place. It has a place.
Mm-hmm.
But what's missing in that place is properly trained individuals who love the work they do and train them as sufficient lights, guides on how to take people through the process. And remember that you're going to make money, because there are no shortages of addicts.
Right.
So even if you get somebody healed and get them better and release them to have a sober-free existence from any drug, I don't know, Tom. I don't know if we meant to end up on this topic or not, but
we're here. And one thing it brings to mind for me is something I feel really strongly about is, being in this world, I've watched, every few years there's some controversial sort of movement within the recovery community. The California sober thing is probably the most recent one.
Yeah.
When I first got sober, there was a whole moderation movement. So, this stuff pops up every few years and there's always this fervor around it.
Yeah.
Factions
Yeah. Yeah.
arguing about how to
It's so
do it.
funny.
Well, and to me, what drives me crazy about that is, so many people caught up in, is medication assisted treatment okay or not? In terms of sponsorship, how, some people think as soon as you complete the steps, you should be sponsoring people and that's enough. I was taught, you don't want the brain surgeon who's never done surgery before, right? I mean, and there are all these people like in the recovery community butting heads over this minutia when the question in my mind is, how the hell are we ever going to put an end to this thing? Because it's not about the drugs. We're
No.
numbing ourselves in mass. What are we going to do about that?
Yeah. 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 Tom, I'm a firm believer today that wherever ego is attached, conflict will always rise its head.
Mm-hmm.
Always. Because if I have to be right, then that means you have to be wrong, brother.
Right. Right.
I mean, that's just how it's going to have to be, bro. Like, and I'm fucking not willing to give up being right.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of fear in it too.
That's why we don't want to give up being right, because we're afraid that if we're wrong, then what else is there out there that I might have to change?
Well, and there's this whole, well, this is the way that I did it, so this is the way it's done.
Yeah.
That kind of closed-mindedness, which does come with a lot of fear. Because if I don't believe that, then if I believe that other things are, then I wouldn't be as invested in what I'm doing or whatever. But it's really just ego.
It's just ego. Because, Tom, I mean, like, we're brothers, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I've never met you in person. I don't know if your pictures are real or not. You know what I mean? Like,
you want to FaceTime later?
yeah, sure.
Okay.
No, I've actually seen you on Instagram, so I know it's real, bro.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm saying, like, so what? Right? Like, what difference does it make whether or not, you look like me or not? We're brothers regardless, because we understand that this thing is for real. Like, this disease, although it manifests itself in so many different ways, I don't have to have lived your way.
Right.
The way that I have that the thing has come up in my life is it's the equal part to so many different things that came before it. And I'm not going to look the way you're going to look, period. And so I don't understand why there's so much. And it's like you said, it's fear. It's fear that if you're right, then I'm wrong. And we can both be right because our journeys are different.
Yeah.
Well, that's why every time I hear the term California sober, I chuckle, because I love that terminology. I don't know, I just do, because it's whatever works. If your life is increasing, expanding, and you're sober and you're making life happen and you're happy, then fucking do it. Because as you grow and mature, you're gonna keep growing and you're gonna keep expanding, and the things that served you today, are not gonna serve you tomorrow. Yeah.
Well, for me, and this is why I wanted to do this podcast about what it's about, because if we're really ourselves and we're doing what we were put here to do, and we have meaning in our lives, and then we don't need to numb ourselves.
Right.
So now, like, I do a group with adolescent and young adult males, and where somebody else might be trying to convince them that they're addicts, I'm asking them, what gets you excited? Like, what do you want to do with your life?
Right.
You got to have a reason to do this.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I love that, especially when you start talking about the younger people. Because the thing is that especially this generation, well, this past generation and the one coming, they are no nonsense generation. They don't want your facades and your masks and your lies and the stories you tell yourself. They want the truth. They want the hard, cold truth, and they know when it's not. And so to have those kinds of conversations with, I used to do an IOP group. That was a part of my gigs. When you work addiction work, you got to have more than one gig.
Right.
It doesn't pay a lot of money. Even as an administrator in San Antonio, I still didn't make a lot of money. Anyway, but one of my gigs was I did an IOP for adolescents. And when I tell you, I went in there with the same stuff that I was, saying to adults. They were not trying to hear that shit.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
No,
they're not miniature adults. That's not what they are.
Not. They are kids, So I had to really adjust, and really shift. And I realized, oh man, this was deep for me. I realized they don't want all that shit. They just want the truth, and then they can make a decision about whether or not they're going to say yes or no to it. And so, it was a lesson for me because, man, I needed the same thing.
Yeah.
All of the hoopla and all of the stuff that, that we go around and around about, none of that shit matters. Just tell me the fucking truth.
Well, there's that. And then they want to be heard and they need to be loved. I mean, at its core, that's what this work is. It's a way to love someone the way they need to be loved.
Yeah. And the only way we know how they need to be loved, Tom, is if we ask them.
Right. Yeah. This got deep, didn't it?
I knew it was going to. I'm not surprised at all. Yeah.
So, I asked you to listen to this last episode where some of the stuff that I've been working on around manhood.
I don't know what you're about to ask me, but I want to just interject real quick. For those of you who are listening, I want you to know that this cat on the stage with me right now is brilliant. Tom, that podcast that I listened to was so moving and deep, bro. And your voice is like butter, man. I was telling my girlfriend, I was like, his voice.
Thank you.
And she was looking at me like, are you okay? I was like, his voice is like, and I really got deep. I was like, his voice is like that butter that's not like melted, that still has its shape, but it's real soft. So as soon as you put the hot butter knife in it, it just melts.
Oh my God.
And that's your voice, man. Listening to you, Tom, like I could listen to you read and tell stories, bro. Like you would be my favorite podcast. I promise you, because it was so soothing, but not just how your voice sounded and the resonance of it, but what you were saying about manhood and being man enough, and your experience and your story behind that. Tom, beautiful. I don't know if you've shared if people listen to already, but I want all of you who are listening to please go check out this cat's podcast. Deep, heartfelt, amazing stuff, man. So yeah, of course I listened to it, and I tell you, I don't know what you're getting ready to ask me, so I'll shut up. But it was amazing, and I want everybody to hear it.
Thank you for all that. First of all, I mean, I didn't have really a specific question I was going to ask you about it, but I guess I wanted to hear about, obviously, your feedback on what you thought, but what does it mean to you to be a sober man? Because it matters, right? I mean, it matters.
Absolutely, it matters. Yeah, absolutely, it matters. I mean, it's the only thing that matters, because anything that I put before that, I'm going to lose it, right? You know what they say? So yeah, it's the only thing that matters is me being but I like how you said a sober man, because for me, it's a little bit more specific when you add the man to it, even though sobriety is what it is, it's sobriety. But the meaning behind being a sober man. So, okay, I'll say it this way. There is a verse in the Bible. I read the Bible. I think it's a beautiful, just one of the most beautiful things I've ever read. But it talks about one of the verses says a double-minded man is unstable in all of his ways. And so for me, when I think about pre-sobriety, before sobriety, and the multiplicity of lives that I had to live to keep my secret, I was not just double-minded. There were times when I was quadruple-minded. There were times when I had so many different stories going on that I could not keep up minded. And so unstable is really doesn't really describe my life during that time period. It really is it's not a big enough word. It's not a heavy enough word. Unmanageable is how the book says it, but I feel like it was way more than just unmanageable. It was completely out of control. And so when I dropped that down into relationships and people who were counting on me, and career choices that I made, and relationships that I built with unhealthy men, with relationships that I built with vulnerable women. You know, when I think about all of life then, it was chaos, Tom. A lot of times people had no idea how much chaos was going around them because I was juggling like, you know, the guy who juggles the chainsaws. The chainsaws in one hand and the bomb that's lit in the other hand. That was my life, man. That was my life. And of course, you get tired. You grow weary of living so many lives and disappointing so many people and always having to say, I'm sorry. So today, you know, and being you know, a father you could put your eyes on, but who wasn't emotionally available. And a husband who I was in the house, but I was not thinking about you. You know, jobs that I gave half efforts to, you know, and always waiting for the other shoe to drop. There was no way that I could ever step into and be anybody that who could be counted on during that time. And so as a man, you know, before recovery, I never measured up, man. I always continued to live out the very thing I thought about myself anyway, which was I wasn't anything but a piece of shit. And I just continued to perpetrate that in every single situation and never felt like I was a man that could be worthy of love and respect or any of those good things. So unstable, unmanageable, out of control. Today, what being a sober man means to me is peace. My life looks peaceful. Like I don't have crazy shit going on in my life. You know, and if it gets crazy, it's just because I chose to, just to mix it up. But it's not you know, an out of control runaway car, you know, snowball going down the mountain, out of control type situation. It was, you know, it would be just something that, you know, I chose to be crazy about, but I could quickly recognize it, you know, and move out of it. And it doesn't mean that I lose my sobriety. It just means that, you know, I stepped into a moment of ego. But, you know, but it's intentional living. You know, it's intentional living. It's intentional choice making. And the only thing influencing it is what I choose to allow to influence it, and no longer the addiction. It means that people can count on me today. It means that, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to do exactly what I said I'm going to do. It means that 100% of the time, what I'm saying is going on is actually what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so when I walk and I breathe in, there's no blockage in my chest from all of the secrets that I'm hiding.
Mm-hmm.
It just really means, man, that I'm living a life of purpose, and I'm living the life that I was designed to live, one of abundance and one of peace. And the way that I see people, in such a loving way, I've never been able to accept, give, or receive love the way that I am today. I get to cry today, Tom, because I'm happy, bro.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I get filled up and tears come in my eyes, and I'm not sad, and I'm not afraid, and I'm not, feeling regret or remorse. And so to be a sober man today means all of that, man. And that's the short version, bro.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, for me, one of the things I realized after being sober for a while, because, I got sober at 23. And, all the guys in my life were dysfunctional in one way or the other. I didn't have healthy men around me. And this whole idea of the passage into manhood, the transition into manhood. And for me, I had a lot of dysfunctional guys. Well, a few influential ones close to me who half the time were, who the hell do you think you are? You're not a man. That kind of stuff. When what I've learned is what I really needed was to be welcomed into manhood by strong men. And so I do that now. I build young guys up.
Yeah.
And so the way I got that need met was in recovery.
Yeah.
And meeting men who were like you described. They are who they say they are.
Yeah.
And they do what they say they're going to do.
Yeah.
And they try to act out of a place of selflessness rather than ego.
Yeah.
And I think that happens a lot, I mean, that's who is showing up in treatment these days, emerging adults.
That's right.
Adults. So they all need that kind of support and love. And because we really don't have a structured way to do that in our society, this has become a way that it happens.
Yeah.
Because people are lost.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Man, you're so right about that, Tom. As lost as I feel some days, when I feel it, I know I'm feeling it.
Mm-hmm.
And I can, take an inventory of it, and I can sit with it and say, okay, why has this come today, or this week? But imagine going through life like that and not knowing it.
Oh yeah.
Imagine waking up and having no idea why you're here today.
Mm-hmm.
Except to just continue to do whatever I can do so I can feel something today.
Well, and, having that sort of sadness and confusion that you're talking about, and then on top of it, being a guy, feeling bad about yourself for having the feelings in the first place because you think you're not supposed to feel anything, and something's wrong with you if you do.
Yeah, that was one of the things that in that podcast that I listened to, the last one that you sent me, that was so important, is that whole idea around being man enough, and living up to whatever messages about men that you believe, and the pressure it puts on somebody who don't even know who they are, let alone how to live up to this ideal of manhood, you know? Like, yeah, you can't cry. Don't be a pussy. Don't be a punk. Don't let them see you sweat. We got whole commercials built around that. Society at large tells you, don't let them see you sweat, right? Um, don't put on your game face.
Pretend is what they're telling.
Pretend. They're
Pretend.
basically saying pretend. Be something that you aren't. Feel something other than what you're feeling. You know, and that's a lot of pressure, man.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of pressure, and it makes sense why, especially at the ages where young men find themselves chronically addicted to something. It makes sense because, first of all, it's the one thing that you can control, one thing that you chose to do, um, and it's your own little personal private thing for a time anyway, and it helps to relieve the pressure in the moment. And it's a lot of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of pressure, and I loved how you gave men through and when I say men, I really mean yourself, because you were talking about your own stories. How you gave yourself so much grace to recover from that mindset, because that's a part of recovery for me too, man, is recovering from the mindset of this masculinity that I saw. That was never me. It never fit my personality. I was never the guy who was just going to walk up to you and punch you in the face.
Right.
Right? that was never me, man. Like, shut up or I'm going to punch you in the face.
Right.
I was like, hey, I just want to sing. Can we go somewhere by the piano and sing? Let's listen to some music, bro. Like, that was just never me,
Right.
I was never competitive like that. Um, you know, um, and so trying to live in a world that way when it was not me, man, it's just a lot of pressure. And then the thing about that is that the men who are telling you how to be are just as confused as you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, having become really attuned to this stuff, because essentially I went through a divorce, and what led to that was me not showing up as my authentic self and not possessing my power as a man.
Yeah.
But so I pay a lot of attention to this kind of stuff, and I follow certain people on social media. And there was somebody yesterday who, is one of these like influencer manhood guys. And it was a meme that said something about, hey guys, you can only imagine how much your life will open up once you learn to trust a woman's intuition. And I thought, well, what about his intuition? Like,
right.
I have intuition. We all have intuition. We live in this culture where we think of it as women's intuition because women are acculturated in a way where it's more acceptable to feel.
Yeah.
And we're so unclear about what's going on with ourselves as men because we're taught not to feel and ignore it, that we can't be in tune with our intuition.
That's right. So we have to trust something outside of ourselves for it.
Right. So, I just feel like there's so many people out there that like don't get the whole picture, and that the emotional part of it is really what's key. That we have to have a functional relationship with our emotions if we're ever going to get better, if we're ever going to be better.
Yeah. And here's the thing, Tom, is that if you look at the statistics right now, as it relates to men in the home, the fathers who are supposed to be the guys, the lights to teach these things, it's depressingly shocking. Like, young men are not growing up in homes with their dads today.
Yeah.
It's a minority when it's the actual case.
Yeah.
And so, a woman is not meant to have to raise and teach a young man how to be a young man.
Right.
Because again, some of them are still learning and finding out more about their own, womanhood.
Right.
Right. And so, that's why I think, what you're doing as it relates to, mentoring the young men that you mentor is so crucial and important because, a man can only learn how to be a man from a man. I mean, plain and simple. Even if you're the man teaching yourself how to be the man, it still has to come from, it has to come from a man. It just does. I was raised by a single mom. She did a hell of a job.
Right.
But there were some things that she just could never, ever teach me. Even though she wanted to be able to, she just could not. I remember one time my mom was cleaning up in my room, quote unquote, cleaning up. I think she was snooping. And she found a box filled, like a shoebox filled with condoms. Which, first of all, lets you know that I probably wasn't using any of them.
Right. You had plenty, though.
I had plenty. I was ready for some action. I just never got any. And then, the other thing was that she was looking for something. She could feel me changing and my manhood starting to switch and kick in. And so she found the box. And when I came home that day, the box was sitting on my bed. So I knew right away that, she had found it. And so she walks in just as humbly and as loving as she knew how to be. And she was like, well, I was cleaning up in here and I found these. Did you want to have a conversation about it?
You're like, no, I did not want to have a conversation.
I said no. And she says, okay. And she said, well, if you ever want to, just know that I'm available. And my stepdad, was there at the time. And she said, and if you ever want to talk to Frankie about it, and, and I was like, hell no, I will never ever voluntarily talk about this with you. But, she did the best she could, man. That was the sex talk that we had. That's the sex talk my mom gave me. And so, a man who was aware of who he was as a man, having that kind of conversation with a guy, it shifts the universe. It shifts the world.
Yeah.
Because when he doesn't, the gap continues to build,
But I will say, even when those conversations are happening with men, if that man initiating the conversation, the father, mentor figure, isn't grounded, you know what my sex conversation was with my dad? You're not going to turn this place into a whorehouse. That was my sex talk.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, well, there's a bigger story I'll share another day.
Oh, man. Yeah. Yeah, that.
We got a lot of work to do, man. That's the thing. We got a lot of work to do.
It's so true, man. It's so true. Yeah. I read this book one time called Man Enough, which is so crazy that, you were talking about that in your podcast. But it's by this cat named Frank Pittman. And he's a medical doctor, actually. And he wrote this book called Man Enough. Well, in the book, he talked about the father's role with his son and why fathers have been so absent when it comes to raising sons. And he said that a part of the reason is that, we've been so taught and tuned to not being emotional and being competitive with other men that the man who is raising the son feels like he has to compete with his son. And so when you think about that undertone in the relationship, then it makes a lot more sense why some of these dads are just super unavailable and don't know how. And it's because they've been trained to be competitive with every man And so now here you are with this young man.
Well, and then if you feel inadequate, then of course you're not going to want to have that conversation.
Yeah, and that's it. And that's why the competitiveness kicks in, is because they don't think they have anything else to offer except kick their butt and make them strong.
Right.
And, quote unquote strong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, you think about that, man, and how that bleeds into the blooming of addiction in a young man's life.
Mm-hmm.
It makes so much more sense why he chose to get high with his friends.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes so much more sense. It makes more sense why, he chose to delve and deep dive into a world where he could just not have to feel that stuff.
Well, you feel some comfort, you feel some belonging.
Yeah.
It gives you a sense of identity. I mean, there are a lot of things that come from that when you're an adolescent or a young adult that if you don't have that already, man, the skids are greased.
Man, yeah. I mean, how do you succeed with those odds not in your favor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I could just go on and on with you, man. I appreciate you doing this, and I appreciate your friendship. One of the things I really love about Clubhouse is that it just lends itself to meeting our people.
Yeah.
Where in a terrestrial way, like we probably never would have met.
No, absolutely not.
But you're my people, and I think this app is a way to easily find people who you really relate with, and I love that about it. And I appreciate you.
Well, Tom, it's my pleasure, man. I've been looking forward to it ever since you brought the idea up, and so thanks for giving me an opportunity, man, just to come here and chit chat with you, bro. It's been a really fun conversation.
Go. Ezra Bates. Great guy. He's become a good friend. Got lots of good stuff coming up. Follow the show on Clubhouse. I'm doing rooms all the time. If you enjoy the show, please leave a rating. Better yet, a review at Apple Podcasts. Every little bit helps. I want to thank the show's sponsor, the Manor in Windrose Recovery. I want to thank the band Punk Rock Opera, whose music you hear throughout the show. Their songs are used with permission from the artist and under a Creative Commons license. Check out the new podcast, 20 Questions, coming up, as well as Good Counsel, which I produced with my friend Eric Bricker. That just dropped today, episode 1. Really excited about that. Lots of good stuff happening. So I hope the new year is off to a great start for you all. It's going to be a good year. So be good to each other. Be good to yourself. Be nice.
That's our story. I hope you enjoyed the punk rock opera. And we have one last piece of music for you. It goes like this.
Okay, go. You cannot make us. We are the Gen X men. We're just the losers that lived up the street, living on these chords, simple beats. You wanna cheat, you wanna stop, you wanna tear us down. We are the bad plans, man. We got our roots stuck in the ground. Musical generation, self-made bands. We cut our teeth with bloody hands. The rage has instilled in us. Can feed a crowd, give them a rush. Thank you. Good night.